And good morning. This is your friendly neighborhood Tironan, and today I thought we'd take a look at the Focke-Wulf 59. I believe that's the aircraft we got up here today. I'm sorry, the Focke-Wulf 57. This is an interesting aircraft uh, because it never really got beyond the prototype stage. It was done in a competition between the BF 110 from Messerschmitt, and a Hankel design called the 159, if I remember right. It's actually in the tech tree here. Um, yeah, that's it right there. Hankel's design, the 129B. Um, we've got this aircraft mostly upgraded. The final one is the engine upgrade where it gets 34 um, airspeed. And I've upgraded it here so that it had some sort of role. Tried this as the base aircraft without any bombs, and essentially, uh, it's a as it sits here, it's kind of like a really bad P-38. It wasn't maneuverable enough or fast enough to compete with other fighters. Didn't have enough guns to take on ground targets, and the only thing it could do is hang behind other ground attack aircraft and Blenheims and blast them badly, and wait for a single engine aircraft to take it out, which probably isn't a lot of fun. So we're going to go ahead and give this thing a run, see how it feels, and we'll take it from there. There's no history to talk about in this aircraft. It never got any further. It was tried out with a number of engines, wasn't considered much of a success, and the concept that was called forth by the Hitler's air ministry uh, had changed his mind and went on to choose the 110, which went on to have a very successful career for the Germans at the time. And so there you go. But this was not a production aircraft. And I see that a lot in World War planes. I wonder why they choose so many prototypes and put them out there. In some cases, on the Soviet line, it makes sense that they didn't have a good high altitude fire, so they had to invent one. And they actually had prototypes that were intended towards that sort of use, but they never found that much use for them in the actual war. Okay, that makes a certain amount of sense. Um, for the Germans, less so. They needed, um, and it's just a suggestion, but I think that if they had taken the FW-190, split it into ground attack, fighter attack, it would be a lot more um, realistic, and you'd have better aircraft. But that's me for what it's worth. Okay, so now we have bombs and we can actually do something. Boy, did I not like this aircraft with no weapons, no ordnance. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay, so we're going to go in here, and these are soft targets. It's designated by the little round circle here, and we can actually affect those with our guns. And we can actually drop a couple bombs there. Again, we can make another run, drop another couple of bombs. And now the aircraft starts making a lot more sense. Okay. Oh, isn't that lovely? Blew it up right in my face. Okay, so now this aircraft makes a lot more sense than it did. Okay, it's a nice ground attack aircraft in the guise of a heavy fighter, and it's actually kind of turny. Not that you're going to mistake it for a real fighter, but sure beats not having, but it's relatively quick for a Tier 3 uh, aircraft, and you can actually attack something with it. Attack ground targets, you can blast uh, ground attack fighters. It has a role. Whereas before with just the guns and upgraded guns, maybe not so much. All right, but we can go over here to the air base, and you notice the turn isn't, it's leisurely, but it's not unworkable. You can line up behind a few things, give it a blast with your guns, and you got a nice long boost with it. And there we go. We can actually lighten up the aircraft a little bit. But what I really want to do is get in here and blow the hell out of that tower so we can actually capture this airbase. So we'll drop our bombs here. And we can turn, and we actually turned out of that heavy fighter's way. And we're doing a loop. Wow, kind of fun. Like I said, it's not going to get, if ground attack's your thing, this might be a fun aircraft for you. Uh, as you guys know, I prefer my fighters, the faster, the turnier, the more effective the firepower, the more I enjoy them. Don't let that affect you. Just because I don't like ground attacks that much doesn't mean that this isn't a fun fighter and you can't have a good time with it. I'm surprising myself by doing exactly that and having a good time with it. Okay, so we're waiting for our ordnance to regen. In the meantime, let's see what we can do. Maybe we can knock down a heavy fighter or something. That might be fun. And we'll just mosey our way on over there. And I do mean mosey. Doing a whopping 256. This is a Tier 3 aircraft, by the way. Even if it was a fighter, I wouldn't expect that much out of it. Okay, so we have an Arado 192 here we can kind of pick on. There we go. Blew him clean out of the sky. And we'll see if we can't do something with this Arado. And gotta admit, so far I'm not exactly overwhelmed by the guns. You expect a little more out of them. Pair of 20 millimeters. And the roll rate, as expected from a heavy fighter slash attack aircraft slash I don't. When the thing was put up, they wanted this thing to be a bit of everything. And of course, I don't care what country you're talking about, when you do that, you don't get great results. So this thing was heavy, meant to be kind of a bomber, meant to be kind of a heavy fighter, kind of meant to be the ground attack aircraft. Didn't really understand what its role was. They reinforced the aircraft to do all the above, and like most of those sorts of things, it didn't do any of them very well. Which is part of the reason the Nazi regime wasn't, which is known to be vindictive as hell, didn't take much umbrage to the fact that it was a pedestrian design. They just went back and said, "Man, what we really need is a heavy fighter," and picked out the BF-1 Messerschmitt BF 110, and that turned out to be a good choice for them. And we are still waiting for, I'm going to head on back and take advantage of the repair functions we went to such lengths to get. This is a interesting aircraft in the fact that it really wants to do what you want it to do. I mean, it wants to turn, it wants to blast. It just doesn't got the weapons and it hasn't got the engine that it really needs to do that. Um, I'll tell you, I've been in ground attack aircraft I've liked considerably less. Now, nobody's going to tell you that this is the second coming of the IL-10 either, but it's not a bad aircraft. You can actually have some fun with it. I'm not sure this is an aircraft I really want to take in the heavy fighter opposition. The IL-2T, actually, when you get involved with that aircraft, you know that you're going to survive long enough to get the job done. Now, that sounds kind of grim, but it is what it is. Um, if you're hoping for a long one aircraft run with a ground attack aircraft, you might want to adjust your expectations a little bit. But being said, what can be said on it, you can probably contribute more with a ground attack aircraft in this game than you can with a fighter. And people will say, well, Jeff, you're kind of nuts. Well, no, I'm really not, because you can take a base. And sometimes, and a lot of it's because we have bots, and the bots are going to do what the bots are going to do, and you're kind of stuck with it. But say what you want. With a ground attack aircraft, you can really affect the game. And people can moan about it all they want, but you can walk in, and I have literally won games because I went in and grabbed one fighter and then grabbed another grabbed one cap with a ground attack with the Aleutian, as a matter of fact, grabbed one cap and then grabbed another. And that's something you can't do with a fighter. And people can moan and groan and all that, but you can't do that with a fighter. So, what do I think about the aircraft? Well, as a heavy fighter slash, as a heavy fighter, it needs to be more maneuverable by about 200 points at the minimum. As a ground attack aircraft, I've seen worse. Now, it's a tier 3 aircraft. I mean, there's lots of things that can be said for and against it, but it's easy to maneuver around against the various ground attack aircraft out there. You can actually do some fighter, do some, take up a heavy fighter role. It doesn't really have the gunpowder that you'd want to see to do that, but it can be made to work. The bombs are actually pretty good, and you can hit things pretty hard with them. The tail gunner is going to be awfully important to you. Now, I'm just taking a 50-50 because I'm reviewing the aircraft, not how much I can spend on having exceptional personnel in it. Again, the role of this channel is to be the everyman and show you what you can expect from the aircraft, not, Tironan Uber pilot and how much money you can spend on personnel and equipment, right? So that's the role of the channel, and this is the aircraft. I ended up liking this better than I thought I would. Is it ever going to be my favorite? No, but it's a nice aircraft, and it can contribute. And you can see here, let's go on back to the hangar, we'll take a look at what we did. Okay, we shot down 5 aircraft. We destroyed 3 ground targets. We did almost 10,000 points of damage to ground targets, and when we captured then the capture points that we got. In summary, we got a destroyed a target with our rear gunner. Uh, that's badge for capture points, and came in #1 on the team. Yeah. Okay. So there you have it. It's a nice fighter. At its tier, you're going to want to get some with. Excuse me, just 1 second here. Geez, had a frog in my throat. I had to clear there. Okay. One thing I will suggest to you is if you have a friend in this game, get them to climb into a fighter and provide you with a bit of support in a flight. It will make a lot of difference. A good friend of mine, Dave, you've seen him in a couple of my videos, will sometimes get an attorney fighter and guard my backside while I'm doing this, and I've done the same for him. And that's a really effective technique. We won about 7 games in a row doing that, to the point where I was thinking, why isn't everybody doing this? And the thing is, going in there, you're taking caps, which wins you the game, right? And because your friend's in the flight with you and is in good communication with you, he gets to pick off targets that making runs on you right and left, and gets great scores on it. And boy, is that a lot of fun. So that's something I would suggest to you. With this one, you're going to want to upgrade it quickly, and the thing you're going to want more than anything else is the bombs. Okay, it really doesn't have a role without the bombs, unless you want to. Altitude performance is pretty good on this. You can get up to high altitude maybe and blast away. Um, Getting the rear gunner just keeps you alive, and by the time you get this last engine upgrade, um, you're going to look at something you can get up there a little bit with and maybe blast around with the other high altitude fighters. And so that might be fun. Then, so as I upgrade the aircraft, I actually have to spend some time on that one. Let's go ahead and do that. What the heck? Okay, so we're going to do that here. We will, I'm changing my mind. Let's go ahead and go forward with this. I want to see what this thing can do as yet another role, and a kind of, uh, for lack of a better term, half-ass P-38 equivalent to Tier 3. Maybe that will work for it. I'm learning this aircraft, by the way, and I hope you're enjoying the fact that we're going to try it out in a couple of different roles, see what you think of it. A lot of you already have if you've gone up the German line, but for those of you that are considering it, let's take it from there. Might have some fun with it, and this channel really is about exploring and learning. And God knows this is a more forgiving tier to learn at than learning aircraft in Tier 7, where everything's at high altitude, everything has effective guns, and everything's fast and will blow you out of the sky in 2 seconds flat. So uh, that's kind of fun. You're watching somebody having a good time with an aircraft that he wasn't sure he was going to like. That's what you're seeing here. I only ran this thing once and didn't like it the first time I ran it with no modifications. So we'll go ahead and give it a try. What we're going to try this time is we're going to run it up high. And for Tier 3, we'll just follow along with our teammates here. This is a relatively well-performing aircraft at good altitude. You got lots of boost in it. and I see a Blenheim. And I happen to know we can maneuver right with a Blenheim, and we can actually be a fighter against a Blenheim. Now, if you try this with a single aircraft, engine aircraft, and he's got a brain in his head, what he's going to do is turn very quickly and get underneath your guns and blow the living hell out of you. But you don't have to do that here. The Blenheims don't turn on a dime. And I say that from observation because I haven't gone up that line yet. So that's another line that you can expect out of me soon. That's a 192. Don't know much about that aircraft yet. But we can stall out because I hit my slow button and he was too close. Alright, well, here's our common carpet with the wrong colors on, so of course we got to blow them out of the sky. Okay, let's pick up a little airspeed and we can expose our rear gunner to them maybe. There we go. And watching these things fight each other is kind of the dance of the elephants, isn't it? Too much fun. All right. Okay, so it's a friendly fellow, decided to say hi to us, doesn't shoot very well. And he's a DO-17. I think that if I remember right, they call that thing the flying pencil. Well, nobody's going to accuse us of being the most nimble aircraft in the sky, but by God, it does work. Now, I did some research on the armament, and this was an early version, the 20 millimeters it has, was an early version of the aircraft short-barreled version with the 20 millimeter cannons on this was short-barreled version. It didn't have great velocity on them, and ended up being replaced by a autocannon called an MG 15/20, if memory serves me right, which is more effective, higher velocity, and through a shell called the mine shell. And why was it called a mine shell? Well, it had thin walls to it. And because it had thin walls, it got to pack more explosive. Now, people talk about 20 millimeters with reverence, but they are essentially a 80 caliber round, just to demystify it. And they aren't a particularly they don't they do they carry a lot of firepower. Don't get me wrong, but they don't carry that much of an explosive filler. And as such, let's see if I can't light this guy up at least a little bit. And he turns in front of me instead of going underneath me. Well, that's a very strange choice. Folks, if you get one of these on your tail, reverse course, dive underneath him, dive over him, and then get on his tail where you can't do anything about it. Don't try to pull fancy maneuvers in front of them and expect to do anything other than get shot down. That just doesn't work real well. Um, anyway, back to 20 millimeters. They ended up replacing. Of course, this aircraft is a fantasy aircraft. Never made it off the drawing board, but you do run across. The weapons are realistic. I had a 190 that I was working at the other day, and it was an early version, but it was just an awful aircraft. And what it was, it's a ground attack aircraft, really. I guess is what they're going after, and not much in the way of maneuverability, and I didn't think much of the armament. Is because it's got these early cannons. Okay, this is interesting. This is not what I expected out of this aircraft. Now, this fellow is doing it right. He goes after me in the right way, and I'm making sure that since I can't outturn him, I can at least keep my guns to him constantly. And so we'll do things like actually, uh, you'll notice that I'm hitting him back pretty good. I can't get out of this dive. Let's see if I can pull him around a little bit. There we go. And we're not going to last longer. We're on fire here. All right. Finally, a competent fighter pilot on the other side. Didn't really expect to see it. Okay, so we've had a good look at what the aircraft can and can't do. It is a decent at its tier, and I've spent so much time at tiers 6 and 7 recently. I guess I get a little warped there. Is that it's a decent aircraft, especially if it's flown at high altitude, where a lot of the turn and burn fighters, which is almost every single seater that you run across here, um, is going to be very ineffective at high altitude. This one actually performs at 5,000 feet and well. And it can hang in there with all its opposition that's up there with you too. So that makes it really changes the role, right? You can dive with it, you can bomb with it, you can shoot at altitude at it with it, and contest high altitude positions with other fighters. And we did so well. We destroyed 8 targets and assisted with 2 more. Um, okay, so really a decent fighter for its tier. Um, this 20 millimeter in the back is pretty nasty. So I would invest the points to make sure that your rear gunner is good. And I have to admit, I'm pleasantly surprised by the aircraft. It's kind of worth going through. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my exploration with it. I hope you learned something too. For a lot of you, laughing up your sleeves because you've done this forever ago. But this has been a fun aircraft for me. It's really a surprise. Okay, hope you all have a great day. Remember to like the video if you do like it, and to subscribe. I'm a new content provider, and I could use all the subscriptions I can get. Thank you. You have a great day. Bye-bye.